In this episode, we find 5 long-lost classics, including some of the most famous cars of the 20th century.
BMW confirmed that it had been Elvis's 507.
Vintage rides restored to their former glory and beyond.
It was sat in a field in France, been dug out of a hedge.
Buried motoring treasure.
Everything was intact, except the front windshield. They hit it with a shovel.
And lovingly recreated forgotten icons.
Just one of the great mysteries in the automotive world. Was it a happy build? Sometimes I hated this thing. I'd like to have torched it.
5 amazing stories, 5 ultimate rides.
It looked like the car of the future. It definitely was one of America's most famous cars.
Unique, sexy and fun. Ferrari.
Brad's been at the wheel of his beloved sports car for 40 years.
I like to drive it in the hills. I like the steering capability. I like the perkiness of it. This is my 1974 Dino. Cornering, it's incredible.
With a top speed of 146 miles an hour, the Dino was one pacey coupe. It was named after Enzo Ferrari's son Alfredo, whose nickname was Dino. This Italian stallion would have cost a cool $20,000 when it first hit the market in 1971. And this particular Dino has an extraordinary past. Before Brad owned it, it had been buried underground.
The car was purchased is that I was told that it was stolen. Had it stolen supposedly by some kids who were supposed to get rid of the car, and they were supposed to dispose of it, and then covered the car, and then, basically put it under earth.
In 1974, this Ferrari was bought as an anniversary gift. A week later, it was stolen. 4 years later, it was discovered buried in an LA yard.
It started raining, and the kids were playing, and they brought in the police and unearthed it. Supposedly, that's how it was found. Everything was intact, except the front windshield. They hit it with a shovel. They had a splatter mark on it. The interior was dry, and the leather itself was actually still quite nice. It's amazing the wheels survived.
LA droughts in the 70s meant that despite 4 years underground, the Dino was in surprisingly good shape when dug up.
The chrome, all of that is original. The paint job that was done is the same paint job that I had done in 1978. Haven't touched it up since. So, the car was amazing. A lot different than what people would assume a car would be, that it'd be underground for that long.
After its underground adventure, the Dino was given to the insurers and Brad bought it. 40 years later, he's still in love.
The same car that was underground for a good almost 4 years, brought it back to what it is today. Kind of preserved underground for a car that's been in almost 4 years ago. Still holding up pretty good.
From a stolen Ferrari to a car belonging to a man who stole millions of hearts.
The car is an icon for the BMW history.
Mysterious and valuable.
Its appearance, it's breathtaking.
For decades, this ride sat unloved in a California pumpkin shed. Now it's the most valuable BMW on the planet, but then it once did have a pretty famous owner. Built in 1957, this BMW 507 was originally driven by a German race driver as a demo model. A year later, it was sold for $8,000 to an American GI stationed in Germany. His name was Elvis Presley. The king left the army and sold the car to a drag racer in America who put it back on the track. In 1968, the now battered ride fell into the hands of car nut Jack Casper. He had no idea about this baby's famous former owner.
Jack doesn't care about Elvis whatsoever. I got the feeling that he wasn't a fan of Elvis in the slightest. Jack takes it off the road with the intention of restoring it. He accumulates a BMW V8 engine for it. He accumulates the proper ZF transmission for it. All kinds of little details.
But instead of restoring the BMW, Jack stashed it away for decades.
He put 70079 in storage in a pumpkin warehouse in Pescadero, and it sat there for 30 years.
Elvis's missing car became legendary, so automotive journalist Jackie was determined to track it down.
An ordinary 507 is really a $1.2 to $1.5 million car. But with the Elvis Association, it suddenly becomes the most valuable 507 in the world.
A friend of Jack's read about the hunt, and he finally found out who had once owned the BMW rotting in his pumpkin shed.
Jack sends me an email, and then we go down to the pumpkin warehouse where he has the car stored. It was a moving experience because it was the thing that I had been looking for at this point for 4 years.
But this ride was no longer fit for a king.
We take the tarp off, and the car is in intact but rough shape. You can see that the car had been white, overpainted with black, and then red again.
Wait, it was white and then red?
So Elvis had the car repainted in red. Girls, of course, were crazy about him, and they would leave lipstick messages and lipstick kisses all over his white car, which of course drove him crazy trying to keep it clean.
It was red, but was it the real deal?
BMW confirmed that it had been Elvis's 507.
Wow, man, this really is Elvis's ride. Man, I'm all shook up. Jack was offered $9 million for the unrenovated car, but instead, he returned to sender. Back in Germany, the BMW Museum restored it, right down to the original white paint job.
The state of the car when it came to the restoration was pretty bad in nearly all aspects. The framework was rusty, the body itself was rusty itself. In fact, the engine bay was empty when we got the car. Before, there was a Chevrolet engine installed. On the back of the car, we had a big dent, and the trunk wasn't even able to be closed. The interior of the car, and especially the dashboard, have been considered as very beautiful all the decades long.
There was an energy that was present when that car rolled out for the first time, and no one had seen that car effectively since 1960-something.
Jack left the car to the museum. Now Elvis fans around the world can pay homage to his hunk of burning gas. From a rock and roll restoration to a reimagined rust bucket. In Southwest England, a beautiful car with a very dark past.
When you drive this, people don't know what it is.
This pickup was originally built on demand during the Second World War.
When Germany occupied France, they loved Peugeot and they kept Peugeot going. Apparently officers of the German army, and they would draw unusual vehicles for toys for themselves, and the workers of Peugeot were being made to build this car. I'm 98% certain that this was probably built under duress. It's a product of that period. It's a history that took place, and we can't rewrite it. And if something came creative out of it, it's quite astounding, really.
Andy has now rebuilt the ride and given it a second shot at motoring glory.
This is Metropolis.
After 69 years rotting in French bushes, this now rusty wreck was put up for sale in 2014. Andy saw it online and snapped it up. Then, taking parts from other cars of the same era, he created a unique hybrid. This World War II relic hasn't just been rebuilt, it's been totally reimagined.
It was dilapidated, just collapsed. Basically, the truck was so rusty that just everything was disposed of, and I just kept the panels that I needed. If you look at build pictures of the truck, you'll see that it had a flat screen originally, and it had a really ugly roofline. The roofline went up like the new transit shape. That has been chopped. I've lengthened the back, I've shortened the tail.
Andy's brought the glamour of the 1920s to his restoration.
I wanted to accentuate the deco style. The interior seats are Jaguar buckets. The dashboard is the original Speedo, painted in two-tone to match the seats. The steering wheel is very early Porsche. Took the Peugeot line original Mascot. The bonnet and the grille used to be one piece, and I've separated that. The front wings are 1937 SS Jaguar, French 1930s Art Deco side lights.
It wasn't just car parts Andy plundered to complete the look.
Original Art Deco hotel door pulls. The only original part of the car which hasn't been touched in any way whatsoever are the headlights.
A wreck no more. This 1920s tribute now turns heads wherever it goes.
Driving around in a car like this is just good fun. I would love this to go to a museum. An Art Deco sculpture.
From a historical curiosity to a very mysterious motor. This might look like a vintage classic, but in fact it's a modern recreation of a long-lost 1930s one-off.
This is the Bugatti Aerolithe. It's a Type 57, chassis number 57104.
It's beautiful, but back in 1936, when Bugatti rolled out the original Aerolithe show car, it was not a crowd pleaser.
Now we consider this just the ultimate in style and sophistication and beauty because it is absolutely stunning. But, you know, in period, the general public didn't get it.
After being driven on the road just once, the Aerolithe disappeared, so David decided to recreate it.
The original car was made from magnesium. Well, we've made this car from magnesium. It's very light. It's very durable, but it has some very bad habits. It cracks. You can't weld it. The entire car had to be riveted together. In order to work this material, you have to heat it to 850, 900 degrees to make it malleable. Unfortunately, at 1140 degrees, it bursts into flames. We did have fires while we were working it. I mean, it was just a part of it.
Recreating this flammable featherweight took 10 years, and boy, were these guys committed. Almost every part is totally bespoke. Even the letters on the tires were handmade. And to make things even trickier, the team didn't use any methods of technology invented after 1936.
This couldn't just be a looks like the Aerolithe. It had to be an absolute recreation of the Aerolithe. Was it a happy build? Sometimes I hated this thing. I'd like to have torched it. What we had was about 11 photographs. There was 2 blueprints. One was of the brake pedal, and the other was of the radiator. There was virtually nothing. With the photograph overlaying it, we indexed the exact center of every single rivet on the spine. You know, every rivet on that car is exactly where the rivets were on the original. The doors are magnificent. They're very large and very heavy. The seats are very simple. The only thing from the Bugatti factory you see in here is the steering wheel. Everything else we had to hand make, all the woodwork, the instruments. Every single one of these had to be basically cut out by hand. It was all vulcanized on. The wheels, of course, are all brand new. The center spinners, those are original. When you look at this motor, you can see that it's just not an ordinary engine, like a work of art. Again, beautiful to look at. You know, the front of the car is interesting and you know, very pretty, but the back of the car is my favorite part of almost any car I've ever had anything to do with. I mean, I think that the back of this car is just so beautiful and so futuristic for its period. Something that very few people have ever seen is this, but it makes complete sense when you see it. And again, you know, everything you're seeing here, we had to make.
You nailed it, brother, but how does this beauty handle?
You know, a lot of people say, oh, they don't build them like they used to. And they're absolutely right. They don't. Like, there's no windows that wind up and down. There's no ventilation, there's no windshield wipers. When you're in there, you're sealed in. You know, as cars go, this isn't the most usable car in the world, but as art goes, it's an absolute masterpiece.
But can you put your foot down in this masterpiece?
Fastest this particular car has gone, probably 40 miles an hour, you know? You don't want to go rocking and rolling too much with a car that's worth in excess of $5 million.
That is some serious money.
I don't think that was ever the point. It was the point of having this car exist again on Earth, because it was such a beautiful thing.
It's an incredible feat bringing this one-off Bugatti back to life, but whatever happened to the original?
It's been lost since 1936 or 1937. I mean, if somebody found the original car, now it's worth $100 million, $150 million. I mean, it is one of the great mysteries in the automotive world. What happened to the Bugatti Airlife?
Man, I need to find that car. From a recreated retro relic to America's most famous car of the 50s. This is the Golden Sahara 2. Created by legendary customizer George Barris in the 1950s, it was way ahead of its time.
Back in the late 50s, going into the early 60s, it definitely was one of America's most famous cars. It looked like the car of the future. It really caused a stir.
Owner Jim Street took his Golden Sahara on tour, but at the height of fame, it disappeared.
After touring the United States with Jim Street for 4 or 5 years, Jim just retired the car, put it back in his collection, and after the late 60s, the car was spoken of and different stories were told, but no one really got to see the Golden Sahara.
And that's how it stayed until 2018, when Rob's boss bought the Sahara at auction for a reported $350,000.
Jim Street kept it in his own collection for about 50 years, and when he passed away, we decided to buy it.
Converted from a Lincoln Capri, the incredible Golden Sahara 2 was totally futuristic. You could open the doors, start the engine, and even drive it using a remote-controlled touchpad. Restoring this bubble-top beauty cost a cool $200,000, but then it had seen better days.
Here comes this car, and it's an antique yellow gold car. It had duct tape all over it. The natural beauty of the vehicle was evident, regardless of the paint or the flaking. This car is a timepiece. The car deserved to be restored to its glory.
Finding parts for a one-off sci-fi ride from the 50s was never going to be easy.
There was no longer a process to sincerely make neophane tires. A tire that was actually lit up. So instead of wrapping the rim with a traditional bulb, we used LED lights.
With 24-karat gold trim, this is one flashy ride.
So everything about the Golden Sahara was over the top. Hydraulic trunk, it had mink carpeting. There was actually 4 different ways of steering the vehicle. The traditional steering wheel, the steering wheel actually detaches, so you can take it off. So if the steering wheel was not attached, you'd still be able to steer the vehicle. Micro switches on the dashboard. There's one on the driver's side. There's also one on the passenger side. Unitrol to accelerate the vehicle, brake, or left to right. This particular vehicle had a small TV embedded into the dashboard. It also had a reel-to-reel recorder and player and a phone to give you the idea that one day people would be making telephone calls from their car.
Yeah, like that'll happen.
And in the back, although it may be frowned upon today, they had a custom bar.
The Sahara was George Barris's first famous car, but he went on to make a ride for a certain superhero.
Take this car, take the pearl paint off it, paint it black. What does it look like? It looks like the Batmobile. That's what's iconic about this car.
Holy auto inspiration, Batman! Please, can I take it off your hands?
This vehicle would easily fetch over $1 million. But to us, it's priceless.
Five rides brought back to life by the people with the passion and the drive to make it happen. Amen to that. See you next time on Ultimate Rides.